Thanks everyone for joining us today for this online information session about the National Endowment for the Humanities Awards for Faculty at Tribal Colleges and Universities program. Delighted that you could tune in to us today, whether live or on our recording. And just wanted to let you know you can always reach out to any of the three of us about this program at any point, and we are happy to answer your questions. Today, this is an opportunity to find out more about the program and to ask questions. The Notice of Funding Opportunity is posted and applications can now be submitted. The deadline is April 13th, 2022 this year. Notifications will be made in late December 2022 for projects starting on January 1st, 2023 or later. Just first, a quick introduction. I'm Mary Macklem. I'm a program officer in the NEH Division of Research, and I'm the team lead for the 3 awards for faculty programs. And my background is in musicology, and I've been at NEH for just over 10 years. I'm joined here today by 2 of my colleagues at NEH, Jacob Lusk, he is the program analyst for this program, and Chris Shoto, he is an NEH grants management specialist. And I will pass the microphone to each of them to say a word of introduction. Jacob?
Yes, hi, thank you, Mary. My name is Jacob Lusk. I am the program analyst that works with the Awards for Faculty program. I've been working with it for about 3 years now. And today during the webinar, I'll be taking questions from anyone who wants to write in. Microsoft Teams has a little question and answer tool that you can use to send a question directly to me. And anytime after this presentation today, you can also contact us at facultyawards@neh.gov, and we'll be happy to take any questions there. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jacob. And now going to Chris to say a word of welcome.
Hi, my name is Christopher Shotto. I'm with the Office of Grant Management. While the division staff are able to assist you with questions about the content and the programmatic activities of your project, I'll be able to assist you today or at a later time with questions about the administration of your award.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, both of you, Chris and Jacob. So they'll be online with us today, and they are at the endowment. So please reach out to us at any time today and later. Our email there is facultyawards@neh.gov, and you can also reach us on the phone at 202-606-8200. Today I'm going to be speaking about 35 minutes about our program, and then we will move to the question section of the webinar. Jacob will answer some of these questions, and others will be saved. We'll be passing them amongst the 3 of us, depending who's who's most equipped to answer the question. If we don't get to your question, please feel free to write to us an email with your question, and we will certainly be able to follow up with you there. The webinar is being recorded, and an updated link to the recording will be posted on the NEH website, the Awards for Faculty webpage, within 1 to 2 weeks. So with that, I want to shift to a full screen view for you so that you can see the slides. There we go. And the first screen I have here for you to look at is our agenda for today. First, I'll be giving an overview of the Awards for Faculty at TCU's program. I'll be discussing eligibility. I can explain the goals of the program, show you the review criteria, and look at the required application materials. Then we'll take a quick look at how to submit your application through grants.gov. And as I mentioned previously, feel free to type in questions at any time. On this slide, I also have a link to the program page, and you will find all of the information on this link. The Notice of Funding Opportunity is the primary document, gives you all the information about the goals of the program, how to apply, eligibility, the review criteria, and so forth. But we also have some resources at this link, and at the end of the presentation, I will talk to you a bit more about those resources. So first off, looking at the goals of the program, This program seeks to strengthen TCUs by encouraging and expanding humanities research opportunities for individual faculty and staff members. The program supports an individual pursuing humanities research in all areas of the humanities, regardless of geographic or chronological focus. This program does have a special encouragement, which I'll say more about in the next screen or so, for projects related to Indigenous knowledge that sustain and strengthen tribal languages and/or cultural traditions. I wanted to mention the hallmark of the program is flexibility in both project types and award periods. You can take the award between half-time and full-time, for example, so flexible in that regard. And you can also pursue humanities research to various goals. And we will take a look at some of that later in the presentation. Common to all projects must be research on humanities topics such as languages or literature, history, philosophy, or religion. Also, there are no indirect costs and there's no cost sharing in this program required. The funds go to the individual faculty member or staff member. I first wanted to give you an idea of some of the projects that have been funded through this program over the years. And here are three. Christina Mee at NEH College in Arizona, for example, just recently was awarded 12 months of full-time funding for her project. And she will be working on research and writing a book and development of 2 undergraduate courses on the practice of butchering in DNA history and culture. The second project was submitted by Elaine Fleming at Leech Lake Tribal College in Minnesota. She worked full-time over 12 months, and she worked on researching and collecting historical narratives by Ojibwe women of the Leech Lake Nation. Pictured on this slide in the right is the Tribal College Library where she did some of her archival research, and she also collected some oral histories. And the last example on the slide was submitted by David Overstreet at College of Menominee Nation in Wisconsin. And he worked on an archaeological publication about the prehistory of the Menominee Nation of northern Wisconsin. And pictured on this slide is the journal, The Wisconsin Archaeologist, where one of his co-authored articles has appeared. So moving on to the next slide. One question we get asked is, what is our definition of the humanities? And the National Endowment for the Humanities has quite a capacious view of the humanities. Both NEH and the NEA were created by Congress in 1965. And our founding legislation, which was the National Foundation on the Arts and Humanities Act of 1965, defines the humanities as follows. The term humanities is included, but not limited to, the study of the following: language, both modern and classical, linguistics, literature, history, jurisprudence, philosophy, archaeology, comparative religion, ethics, the history, criticism, and theory of the arts, those aspects of social sciences which have humanistic content and employ humanistic methods. So that's just to orient you that topics in all of these areas could be supported through this program. And on the right-hand side is our agency magazine with some of the covers from recent publications. So moving now to the topic of eligibility, who can apply to this program? It's open to all full-time, part-time, adjunct, and retired faculty or staff affiliated with a TCU. You can consult ahec.org for a current list of TCUs. That's what NEH goes by. The Notice of Funding Opportunity also provides more information on eligibility. The program is open to all U.S. citizens and to foreign nationals who have been living in the U.S. for the 3 years preceding the April 13th, 2022 application deadline. No advanced degree is required. However, you may not currently be enrolled in a degree program. If you've satisfied all the requirements for a degree and are awaiting conferral, you could go ahead and apply this year on the April 13th deadline, but you would need to include a letter from the dean of the conferring school or a department chair attesting to your status that you've completed your work. So moving on to some of more details about the program. First off, let's take a look at the dates. Just a reminder that NEH staff will read and respond to draft narratives and work plans. Draft narratives must follow the format specified in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, and they must be submitted to the Faculty Awards at NEH.gov email box not later than February 16th, 2022. I should just mention that the comments from staff, they're not part of the formal review process, and what we write has no bearing on the evaluation of your proposal. We hope it will be helpful to you in strengthening your application. So we provide this service. It is optional, so you do not need to submit a draft. It's your choice. The program deadline. So when would you need to submit the completed application package? This year it is April 13th, 2022. And the Notice of Funding Opportunity explains how to submit the completed application through grants.gov. Be sure to allow enough time for any technical difficulties or other issues, and we recommend that you register for grants.gov now and submit your application well before the deadline in case there are any difficulties, because late applications will not be reviewed. And lastly, as a reminder, decisions will be announced in December of 2022, so it's a lengthy review process. Your earliest possible start date would be January 1st, 2023, and you can actually wait all the way through September 1st, 2024 to begin your project. So there's a large window of when you could take this award if you're offered it. I mentioned in a preceding slide that there's a special encouragement in this program. So I wanted to draw your attention to that. As I mentioned, the program welcomes proposals in all areas of the humanities. Projects related to Indigenous knowledge that sustain and strengthen tribal languages and or cultural traditions are especially encouraged. So please see the Notice of Funding Opportunity for more about that. And in fact, I want to talk to you a little bit more about the flexibility in this program. So I mentioned that being a hallmark of this program, flexibility in project types as well as work plans. So the first thing we'll look at is project types. And if you'll see on this screen, there's quite a bit of choices that you might focus on in your project through this program. Projects can draw on institutional or community archival collections. You could develop primary source materials for a curriculum, such as oral histories, as part of a course revision project, or if you are considering also revising a graduate or undergraduate course. You might also use the unique archives of your tribal college toward a goal of the college or of your community. You might collect oral histories to develop tools such as language dictionaries or databases. And so all of these things could be supported through this program. And you also could travel elsewhere if there's important repositories of materials and you want to go consult them for your project, you could certainly do that. Additional types that are mentioned in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, these were new in the last funding cycle, and we're having them again this year. The idea of a development of a humanities seminar. This could be something that's led, of course, by the faculty or staff member. It could be oriented to the students at the TCU and or members of the local community. And lastly, this program supports development of scholarly resources such as books, peer-reviewed articles, digital materials, translations, critical editions, and other resources. So we hope that the program will meet your project type, and we'd be happy to talk to you about any project idea you're working on and whether it fits to the goals of this program. The idea is these are flexible project types, and we are hoping it will respond to your needs as a humanities professional at your school. So you can reach us at facultyawards@neh.gov or 202-606-8200. So the other aspect of flexibility, as I mentioned, is the work plan. You can work part-time, full-time, or a combination of work plan is supported through this program. You can also work as few as 2 full-time months and all the way up to 12 full-time months of work. Or as we say, the part-time equivalent, the part-time work is defined by NEH as at least 50% of your normal schedule. So as an example, if your usual teaching and administrative load is 4 classes per semester, and you apply to pursue the NEH project half-time, your teaching schedule would need to be reduced to 2 classes per semester. Your administrative loads should also be reduced accordingly, and your NEH stipend is reduced also depending how much time you're putting toward the NEH project. So be sure to be clear in your narrative and your work plan regarding how much support you are requesting. I should say also that the work plan must be submitted as a separate attachment. It shouldn't be longer than a single page, and you should state clearly the amount of support you're requesting and whether you plan to work part-time, full-time, or in some combination. Also, take care to list your dates correctly when you're filling out the application for federal assistance, which is a grants.gov form you'll find in the application package. We go by those dates when we determine your award if you're offered one. We'd also advise that you're very specific with your work plan. What work has been completed already? What work do you plan to do during the award tenure? And then break that work down into 2 or 3 month increments. If you'll be visiting archives, for example, you can indicate which archives and which sources you will consult. If you'll be doing oral histories, you can clarify when that will take place and how many oral histories you'll be collecting and so on. If you'll mainly be focusing on a publication of a book or an article, you can indicate what parts of that publication has been written and what you will do during the work plan. And lastly, I want to mention that you don't need to complete the project during the period of the award. However, you should indicate to the reviewers how and when your project will be completed once you've returned to your regular teaching and administrative duties. So this screen shows some of the typical activities that can be supported through this program, and also what typically might result from this program support. So first, looking at the left column, we support a wide range of activities. Archival research in local or distant repositories, collection of oral histories, ethnography, or you might be working at your home office or on your college office, university office on editing, writing, and revision. You don't need a budget for this program and you should not submit one. Looking at what might result from this grant program, and you can see you can work on research leading to undergraduate or graduate course revisions. As I mentioned in the preceding slide, create a new humanities seminar for students or the local community. You could create something that speaks to community or institutional goals. For example, if there's materials at your campus and you wanted to work on an exhibit of materials, perhaps you could do related research and publication surrounding that exhibition. Also, materials in support of sustaining, revitalizing, or preserving language could be the result. We have one project some years ago that was working on a database, a language database. Lastly, you might be publishing an article or book, or you might be working on a database. So in that project I just referred to, that individual was working on materials, creating materials, and it took the form of a database. So with that, we've talked about the goals of the program. We've looked at some of the key details for the program, the dates, the deadlines, project types, and work plans. Now let's move into what happens after you submit your proposal. So your proposal is due to grants.gov April 13th, 2022. And after that point, the NEH will receive applications that have, met their complete applications and they were submitted correctly and so forth. And once NEH determines that they are complete proposals and that they have the necessary components and that the page numbers are all correct and all that kind of thing, it will begin to go through a review process at NEH. And in fact, all proposals at NEH go through a multi-stage peer review process. We have more about that process on the NEH website if you're interested. Here's the criteria for this particular NEH program, and these appear in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. You should keep these prominently in mind when you're writing your proposal, because all reviewers will assess your project using these criteria and only these criteria. So the first criterion pertains to the intellectual significance of the project for the humanities. So tell your reader what your project is about and why it is important. You should explain what it will contribute to your specific field or the audience you are trying to reach in a way that a humanities generalist can understand. And you should situate your project in the broader context of humanities research and knowledge. Describe who will use your work and for what kind of field. Criterion 2 addresses the quality of the conception, definition, organization, and description of the project, as well as the clarity of the expression. And peer reviewers generally seem to find that a well-written, clear application is a good predictor of the quality of the planned product. So writing a good abstract and narrative is important. Propose specific research questions, explain your methods, concepts, and approaches. And similarly, if digital or other technologies will be employed, explain how and why you will use those. Describe and justify the sources for your project, the archives, texts, objects, interviews, and so on. Criterion 3 pertains to the plan of work, and we already discussed a bit about the work plan attachment 2. This can be a chart, a list, or a narrative, but make sure your work plan is clear. It should clearly state whether you're seeking part-time, full-time, or combination support, and it should be clearly indicated. Criterion 4 asks reviewers to consider your preparation for the project. If a new research area for you, explain how you came to it and your skills for doing so. Be sure to address your language competencies, your knowledge of archives, and so on. And then the last criterion pertains to the likelihood that the project will be completed, as well as the dissemination and access plans. Mention the expected publication or other outcomes of the project. If you're proposing a book, you can provide a description of the proposed book, such as the chapters. If you have a publisher or series in mind, you can mention that specifically. If you're planning to write an article, indicate the likely length of the article and where you might publish this. And we have more about these review criteria in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. You can see section E1. So having looked at how your application, what aspects of it will be reviewed, the criteria, I now want to look at the components of the application package. There's several things that you need to prepare in advance of the April 13th deadline. Here's a list of those items, and this actually, the application component table pictured here comes directly out of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. You can see from this table that the first 3 items are forms, and they are available on the grants.gov website in the application package and will need to be filled out online. The remaining materials are attachments, so attachment 1 through 8, that you can write offline and save as PDFs in advance of the deadline. And then be sure to have them ready to upload with your application as PDFs. So another important thing is the grants.gov will only accept PDFs, not Word documents or other formats. The fourth column here lists whether the component is required, recommended, or conditionally required. And if it's conditionally required, that means you should only submit the items described in the notice of funding opportunity if it applies to your project type. And I'll talk more about all of these areas on the next slide. Please be aware that applications that exceed page limits or violate format instructions will be considered non-responsive and will be rejected from further consideration. So, for example, if you include a narrative that goes over the 3-page limit, so you can see here the narrative's 3 pages is the limit. If you submit something that goes over that into a 4th page, for example, unfortunately, your application would be declared non-responsive and then your project wouldn't be evaluated. So please check the details in the notice of funding opportunity and in this table. We really don't like to have to declare things non-responsive or incomplete, so we hope that this will be helpful to you. Also, just to reiterate, the file must be named, it must be a PDF. Otherwise, grants.gov will reject it and your application will never get to NEH. So let's take a look at some of these attachments more specifically. The first one is very important. Attachment is called the narrative. This is a required attachment, and there's 4 areas that the notice of funding opportunity advises you to write about. The first being the overview or the significance and contribution of the project. It's very important to make this case, identify your audience for the project, explain why it is significant to the humanities, state your thesis, provide some scholarly context for your project. What work has already been done on it? What's the state of research on the topic? How will your work contribute? Will your work build on? Will it disagree? Will it provide a new interpretation? If you're proposing a course revision, explain how the research relates to revising the course, such as the readings and the methodologies. Address the significance of the course in your teaching and for the institution, and also provide information on how many times you've offered the course or it's been offered at your institution, the number of students typically enrolled, and so forth. And when possible, explain the broader significance of the project beyond the single course. The second area is organization and methods. Here you explain the concepts and terminology and how the final project will be organized. You can provide a brief chapter outline if you're working on a book, for example. If you're proposing a dissertation revision, you should state that in the narrative. In fact, you must do that, and explain how your project moves beyond that dissertation. The next area, competency, skills, and access. In this section, address your level of competence in any language, skills, digital technology, and so forth that you need for the project, and address any arrangements you've made or will need to make to pursue your research, whether to archives or collections or different institutions, libraries, and so on. And then lastly, final product and dissemination. You should describe your final product and how will you reach the audience you intend to reach. How will you disseminate your project results? If you have a website, you can provide the URL. And you can talk about the sustainability of that website if that's the case. If you're doing a course revision, explain if there are plans to expand the sections offered or replicate the course on other campuses or disseminate the results more broadly. And we do have some application samples on our website that may be helpful as just to get some different ideas about how to approach that. Okay, so looking at some of the other attachments, and again, I'm working with this application component table. So we talked just now about the narrative. Some of the other attachments now I'll be talking about in this next slide. So other required attachments include the work plan, which we've already gone over, the bibliography, which sorry, let me just clear that. Okay, the bibliography, which is a 1-page document. Sources should show the range and scope of your project, both primary and secondary sources, and it gives panelists an idea of the scope of your project. The resume is a 2-page CV, and the notice of funding opportunity gives you some tips on what to include there. Then we move to the next item. It's a recommended item this year, the confirmation of institutional support. It's new this year that it's recommended and not required. We hope that you will include it with your application materials on April 13th, 2022. But if you cannot obtain that by that deadline, you will need to submit it if you are offered an award later in the competition cycle. This is a document and it should be on letterhead, confirming institutional support. It needs to be signed by an institutional representative, such as staff in the Office of Sponsored Research or a vice president or a dean. And it should indicate that your institution will allow you to accept this award, even though it could reduce your teaching load. And while NEH encourages you to submit this document, as I mentioned, if you are recommended for funding, you must submit it prior to NEH issuing the award. And the last item there is conditionally required attachments. And the notice of funding opportunity has full details on that, so I would ask you to look at that. But applicants proposing additions, translations, database projects, proposals including visual materials, and proposals to improve existing courses, you should submit additional materials for these. And these appendices should not exceed the page numbers per item as described in the notice of funding opportunity. So please pay close attention to those details. Other conditionally required documents include the conferral of degree document or the explanation of delinquent federal debt. A few other things that you'll need to have ready for submission. I just want to alert you to these two. They actually both appear in these online forms through grants.gov, but you can write these offline and have ready to cut and paste. The project summary and title will be requested for SF 424 individual, that's the application for federal assistance. And you can compose that abstract and title in advance of filling out the form so that it's ready to go and you've been able to proofread it and make sure it says what you want it to say. And the other item that you'll need to have ready are two references. These will be entered on the NEH Supplemental Information for Individuals form, and NEH contacts your referees using the emails that you have provided here after the program deadline. You will be able to monitor whether the referees have submitted their letters after the deadline, and NEH will send you a link to do so after you submit your proposal. And just some reminders on there, already referred to these, but you don't need budget. The funds go to the individual faculty or staff member, and indirect costs are not allowable. I just want you to know that a few things that I've taken directly from the Notice of Funding Opportunity in section D2, page 6, just to bring your attention to the importance of the details. Applications missing any required documents or conditionally required documents will be considered incomplete and will be rejected from further consideration. Applicants that exceed the page limits or otherwise that violate formatting instructions will be considered non-responsive and will be rejected also from further consideration. And don't include any other attachments other than those required or conditionally required in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Doing so will result again in NEH rejecting your application. Just a note to clarify here. You should include the confirmation of institutional support at the time of application if you have it ready. It's a recommended document. But if you don't have it ready, you will not be declared incomplete. You will need to submit it, however, as I mentioned, later on if you're offered an award. So just to draw your attention to the importance of those details, we really, the staff, we don't like to see applications that are incomplete or that exceed page limits. And we don't like to declare those non-responsive, so we just want to make sure that you're aware of these issues. So that takes us into submitting your application. So now you've written all your attachments, you've saved them as PDFs, and you have your materials ready to upload and to submit to the grants.gov interface. Firstly, I would just urge you to register right away for grants.gov. It sometimes can take a little while for your registration to go through, so please don't leave it too late before the competition. You can go ahead and register today, for example. You don't need to put any application materials in. It doesn't commit you to applying. You just make yourself an account on grants.gov by registering today. When you are doing that, you will need to create an individual applicant profile in your account. Because if you don't do that, grants.gov assumes you are an institution, such as your institution, your college, or maybe it's a federal government site for grant applications throughout the government. So they more typically will see institutional applicants. So you need to notify grants.gov through your profile that you are an individual. Then you will see that button turn red, and you will be able to click on it and begin putting in your application package, that one I've circled there in the red circle. A reminder to submit the application early to allow time for any technical problems. So if you're, for example, you don't want to have your application rejected because you went close to the deadline and submitted it and then got a message back from grants.gov that said, oops, this was a Word doc, we can't accept it. And then by the time you have a chance to resubmit the corrected application file, it's after the deadline. Unfortunately, NEH will not be able to review that package. So we want to make sure that you allow yourself enough time for anything like that so that you have time to fix it and resubmit. And lastly, here's a resource, is the grants.gov helpline is 1-800-518-4726. They are there 24/7 to answer your questions and to help you with the grants.gov interface. And it's best to direct your questions to them. If it's a grants.gov question, they'll be most equipped to answer it. And so here comes my final slide in this section of the webinar, and these are about the resources for you. First off, I would just reiterate that we have a web page on the NEH.gov website. We call it a program resource page, and it's devoted to this particular program, the Awards for Faculty at Tribal Colleges and Universities. On that page, you will find the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Again, it's about a 20-page or 21-page document telling you all about the program and all the requirements and how to submit your proposal. Also on this page, however, we do have sample application narratives. So you can kind of see the range of approaches that applicants have pursued. These are all successful and were funded proposals. So go ahead and take a look, not as as a strict way that you must do your narrative, but rather as insight into different ways that applicants have made successful cases for their projects. I also want to remind you that staff can give you feedback on a draft narrative and a work plan. Those are due this year, February 16th, 2022, and you should submit those as an email to facultyawards@nih.gov. Also on the program page, we have a link to recently funded projects across the 3 Awards for Faculty programs, so you can kind of get a sense of the types of work that have been supported. And we have a brief FAQ document, frequently asked questions, which can help with some questions that you might have. Also here, I've got the terms and conditions document. So were you to be offered an award, this gives you the rules and regulations about it. Sometimes applicants have questions about, what would happen if, so you can take a look at that. And I don't want to forget to remind you that the NEH staff, I hope you will think of us as a resource and that you will call us and email us. We are very happy to answer your questions, to talk to you about your project types, to help you with any aspect of the application process. Myself and Jacob and Chris for the grants management questions, we're all here to answer your questions. So faculty awards at NEH.gov or 202-606-8200. And that brings me to my final slide with our contact information. and so that you can follow up at a later point should you wish to do so, and again with our email and phone number. And with that, I'm going to come out of the full screen view to ask Jacob if he wants to start us off with some of the common questions that we hear, or if there have been any questions that have been put into the question and answer box. And I will also shift screen to some of the questions we often get so we can look at those as well. So let's see, you should see now a screen that says questions. The first question, so I'll let Jacob take us off here in case there's any questions to answer from all of you, and also just to help us get through answer your questions.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. We do have some other questions, but I guess we can start with some of these on the slide here. The first question, can I apply to other NEH grant programs concurrently? The answer is yes, most programs you can apply to concurrently. You cannot apply to any of the other fellowship programs offered by the research division in April, including the fellowships program or NEH Mellon Fellowships Program. However, you can apply to institutional grants in other offices throughout the NEH. There may be restrictions if you were to receive more than one award on when you could take each award, but that would just be something you'd want to follow up with a staff member. But yes, you can apply to other NEH programs concurrently. You can also apply to other research division programs such as summer stipends and public scholar. Should I apply to the Awards for Faculty or NEH Fellowships program? Mary, do you want to speak a little bit more to that?
Oh, sure. I'll take that one. I'll shift the camera again. Sure, that's a question that we do sometimes get. These programs both support individual researchers in the humanities, and there's some overlap between these two programs. The frequently asked questions document provides a table that kind of compares and contrasts these programs and some of the main differences and similarities. What I would say about them is that some of the main differences are the Awards for Faculty program can support a shorter work period. So you can work as little as 2 full-time months or the equivalent, whereas fellowships you need to work at least 6 full-time months. And they both can support up to 12 full-time months equivalent. That brings me to another distinction, which is that the Awards for Faculty program can support half-time or more work on your NEH project, whereas the fellowships program is designed for full-time support only. So that gets back to the flexibility of the Awards for Faculty program, so that might be something to take into consideration. And then the other area that I would consider as you're thinking about which program you want to apply to are the types of projects that can be supported through these programs. So both programs can support books and articles and scholarly resource projects. The Awards for Faculty has a broader purview, though. It can also support, as we discussed earlier, projects that speak more to a community or institutional goal, or also or the humanities seminar that you could create, for example. Or it could also support course revision projects, and those latter two examples would not be eligible in the fellowships program. So as you work on your project and think about these programs, that might be something to consider. And then I see on the slide we have a couple of questions that I'll turn over to Chris to give us his perspective on those questions, and I'll put his, you'll be able to see him in just a moment. There he is.
Great, thank you, Mary. So another couple of questions that are somewhat related that we frequently receive are, does my university or college submit the application for me? An important distinction to make with the Awards for Faculty and the Fellowship program versus many of NEH's other programs that these are individual award programs. So the application should be submitted through the applicant's individual grants.gov profile and should the proposal should be drafted by the individual. That said, it's perfectly acceptable to have someone in your institution's sponsored research office or similar office assist you with uploading and submitting your application. And we know that that process can be somewhat daunting, particularly if it's your first time doing it. So the answer is yes, you can have someone assist you with that submission, provided that the application reflects your own proposal. Another frequently asked question is, do I need to submit a budget? We're happy to say no. As you saw in the listed application documents earlier, budget's not required for this particular program, nor is there any financial reporting requirement on the back end of the program. Just a sort of related information to keep in mind is that because this is an individual program for which the individual is the recipient, all of the award funds should be paid to that individual recipient either as a salary replacement or through fringe benefits. The university should not be retaining any portion of the award as an institutional allowance or similar sort of fee. And I think that about addresses those questions, so I'll pass it back to you, Mary.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you, both of you, for your insights there. I'm going to picture Jacob next, who's handling the questions today.
Yeah, so we have a few questions that I think we'll address publicly. The first question, and this is probably one of the most common questions we get: how many awards are made in this program? And we could point you to the program webpage that is up to date with all of the latest statistics. The average success rate in this program is currently at 12.8%, I believe.
Yeah, 12.3. Yep, 12.3 we have up there.
Yes. And so it is competitive. It is a higher success rate than the NEH Fellowships program. How is the confirmation of institutional support different from letters of recommendation? This is an important question because the confirmation of institutional support should come from an administrator at your institution, essentially letting NEH know that if you were to be offered an award, you'll be able to take the award, that the institutional will essentially support you in taking time away from your usual duties to work on your funded project. This letter does not have to be long or even particularly detailed. It's really just what we call it, a confirmation that you'll be able to take the award. The letters of recommendation, however, are going to be letters that reflect on your project and your work plan, and sort of engage with the research, writing, or other work that you're planning to do, and pointing out its strengths, hopefully with reference to the 5 evaluation criteria that Mary laid out earlier. And then another question is, who should I choose to write my letters of recommendation? And this is really up to you. As I said, the best letters are those that really engage with the project, with the work plan, and provide some key insight into the strengths of what you're proposing. And so colleagues who are familiar with your work, or academics from other institutions in your field, or members of the community who are helping to execute a project, all of these are types of people that might be able to contribute a strong letter for your project. So we would encourage you to choose the person who can best explain the strengths of your project to the reviewers. Mary, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you hit all the main points. That was very helpful advice. Thank you for addressing that. Yeah.
Well, the next question I will turn over to you. The question is, are there any project types that are given preference over others? For example, are book projects preferred over course revision projects?
Oh, thank you. That's a great question, and happy to speak to that. So as 2 of the slides in the program indicated today, one of the main goals of the program is to be flexible and to meet the needs of the humanities at your tribal college or university. And in that regard, we have broad ideas on what the project could be, they all would need to be founded on humanities research. Research in those humanities disciplines that were, listed or related areas: philosophy, language, linguistics, history, and so on. But the end result could be a lot of different projects. And so, no, we don't have a preference for one project over another. As I mentioned, we do have that special encouragement for projects related to Indigenous knowledge. And however, you can have a project that is not pertaining to that, and that would also be a fundable project in this program. So again, I would just urge you to reach out to us, to myself or to Jacob. We're happy to talk to you about your project and what you're working on, and to kind of brainstorm and think about how this program might be able to support the project. So thank you. That was a great question. Are there any other questions?
I have just one more, and then I think we'll be able to wrap up. The final question is, when can I take the award if I apply to this cycle? As Mary pointed out earlier in the presentation, if you apply to this cycle and receive an offer, you can take the award as early as January 1st, 2023, or as late as September 1st, 2024. There's no required end date. That is to say, if you propose 12 months of full-time funding, then your award period will extend from whatever your start date is for a year. And if you were to take 24 months of half-time work, your project could begin as late as September 2023 and extend, or September 2024 and extend all the way to 2026. So these can be quite long-term projects, but you have the flexibility to decide within that 19 or 20-month period when to begin your award. Our staff will assist you in planning. Chris and his colleagues will assist you in planning your payment schedule and so forth. But thanks for that question.
Great. Those are excellent questions. And thanks for facilitating these questions with us, Jacob. Chris, is there anything else that you wanted to add from the grants management perspective, or do you think we've covered everything today?
No, just to sort of reiterate what was already said. This is sort of a unique program in that there is not a budget to be concerned with in the application stage. You don't need to be worried about sort of indirect costs or anything like that. There's no drawdown requests. The payments are made on a schedule that we create at the time the award is issued. Sort of, we're happy to assist with any specific questions, but in terms of the grant administration side, a lot of it's taken care of kind of upfront.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you both, Jacob and Chris, and to all of you who are tuning into the webinar. We're very happy to speak to you about the program today. We hope it's been helpful to you, and we hope that we'll see lots of draft narratives on February 16th. So don't forget, you can submit that for staff comment February 16th, 2022 this year. And we hope we'll see your applications on April 13th, 2022. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us by phone or by email. The three of us would be happy to hear from you and to talk to you about your projects. And thanks again for tuning in. Goodbye.